I'm going to hand this over to our wonderful panelists to provide their own introduction, and then we are going to get started with our day together.
Thank you. Hello, all. It's great to connect with you. So my name is Mandy Purrington Drake, and I am the director of Act for Youth, which is a project within the Bronfenbrenner Center for Translational Research here at Cornell University. And I'm also a research collaborator with the Cornell Social Media Lab. And so Eunice, I'll turn it over to you for an intro.
Mhm. Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Eunice Han, and I'm the lab manager and research coordinator for the Cornell Social Media Lab. And we'll be talking more about the tool that we developed at our lab today too.
So thank you all for joining. I we were kind of hoping to get a sense of who's here, who's on this Zoom here today. And I think it's probably, we can probably go ahead and just have you drop this in the chat. So in the meeting chat, if you would kind of share, what is your role? What brings you here to this meeting today? We just kind of want to get a sense of who's in the room and what interests. Okay, great. Director of Workforce Support, researcher, community evaluation support, a regional lead, children's long-term support and service coordinator. Great. Okay. Coalition project director, adolescent health manager. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so there's quite a bit of diversity in roles and what brings you here. So this is great. Okay, wonderful. I would also be willing to guess that at least some folks on the call are parents who perhaps have children who are middle school aged or thereabouts. So some of this may also feel kind of personally relevant as well. I know that certainly is part of what led me to working on this project. As we'll talk a little bit more about social media test drive, as Eunice kind of alluded to, which is an educational program designed for middle school age students to talk about how to use social media in ways that are safe and positive and pro-social. And when this project was in its infancy, my kids were just approaching middle school age. So they're now 16 and 13. And they have been guinea pigs all along the way in terms of developing this program and given their very honest feedback about some of the features. So so thank you for sharing. I hope that you find this to be relevant in your your work lives and also possibly in your personal lives. So we wanted to kind of start things off with a small group discussion. I think we were going to have folks get split up into breakout rooms, and we have some questions up here. Yeah, so for this small group discussion, we wanted you to think about a couple of things. So obviously we're here to kind of talk about social media use. We're thinking about middle school aged youth and also how that sets them up kind of later along in adolescence. But in your small groups, if you could just kind of discuss what are the potential benefits of social media use for adolescents? And then I think something we're perhaps a little more familiar with, what are the potential risks of social media use? And so I think I'm not sure who is going to split us up into small groups.
It's me. I've got you.
Okay.
So we are going to split folks up into small groups. We are going to go ahead and give you about 5 minutes to discuss with one another, and then we'll come back and report out. Is that enough time, Amanda?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, wonderful. So we're going to assign you to breakout rooms. So I'm sorry, you don't get to choose one. The discussion prompts are on the screen now. You may not have access to those as you enter the breakout room. So for that reason, we'll drop them in the chat as well for you to touch, just to have a touch point. I'll also let you know the timing along the way, but you should be seeing some sort of pop-up depending on the version of Zoom that you have. So it may be at the bottom of your screen, but at the ellipses next to the end or after the leave meeting, it may be at the top. If you have trouble finding your opportunity to exit to a breakout room, please let us know. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming back into the room and joining us. I could see the microphones lighting up, so I knew there was some strong discussion going on. So thank you so much for giving of yourself in that time. I'd love to hear from you. What stood out? So what were some of the things we thought could go well for our youth?
Okay, I can chime in. Some of the things, the benefits we said were like, one of the things I brought up was, as a parent and also someone who works with like every age group of youth, that social media is a need now. And so it is like it's a need and its own social determinant of health. Like it's a whole new category, and how it's woven through everything in society now, as much as I don't like it, as much as I don't want it to be that way. So there is so many amazing opportunities for our youth to be involved in like activism and engaging in society and becoming more responsible in their participation in society. And so that was one of the major ones that I brought up. And we just talked about like how it's a creative outlet and how there's the connection. And with every single thing that we said, there was also the risk side of it.
Absolutely. With connection, there can come risk. And I love that you identified, this is how they're participating in society. And it's, it's a really valid need for individuals. Absolutely. What else did folks talk about in the breakout rooms?
We talked a little bit in our breakout room about the notion of information sharing. So in addition to kind of connecting with peers and connecting with others, a lot of people receive their information, especially, I think the idea like scholarships and those kinds of things were talked about, through social media networks and those types of applications that will really help further and advance their education, advance their, ability to take that next step in their journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. There's opportunities for education and opportunities to further it. I love that. Well, Mandy, I'm going to hand it back over to you. I know that you have, you have a formal presentation to share with us. So I'm going to be in the background, sort of facilitating check or monitoring chat and things like that. So I'll chime in if there's a comment hanging out in the chat for a while. But I'm going to let you drive the ship now.
Okay, wonderful. So Eunice is going to, thank you, share. So while we're getting this pulled up here, I do have a quote that I wanted to share. So I think we had a really pretty balanced discussion about potential benefits and potential risks of young people, adolescents using social media. But I'm gonna pop this quote into the chat. So this is, I'll read it out loud as well. So the popularity of this new pastime among children has increased rapidly. This new invader of the privacy of the home has brought many a disturbing influence in its wake. Parents have become aware of a puzzling change in the behavior of their children. They are bewildered by a host of new problems and find themselves unprepared, frightened, resentful, helpless. They cannot lock out this intruder because it has gained an invincible hold of their children. So that's pretty dramatic. But so this obviously is kind of expressing concerns, right, about this new activity. And I just wanted to ask folks, when and where do you think this quote came from? You can, if you're bold enough, you want to just unmute and share, you're welcome to do that, or respond in the chat.
Fox News.
A solid guess.
Very fear-based.
Very, very fear-based. Absolutely. Yeah. Does anyone want to guess like what year or about what year this quote came from? Okay, perhaps you can tell by the question that you might be surprised by the answer. So this quote is from 1936. And this is not about social media. This is about radio programs and children. And so this was, the latest technology that was invading our homes. And I do love sharing this quote when we talk about social media and thinking about young people and concerns that we have about young people using social media, just to kind of underscore the fact that adults' concerns about the latest technology's effect on young people is not anything new, right? We have these concerns all through our history. So this is about radio programs. We see the same sort of thing about comic books, about novels. I think many of us may have grown up in an era where television and video games were the big technology fear, right? And so now there does tend to be a lot of fear around the potential negative impacts of social media. So I just like to kind of put that out there as a we have always had these sorts of concerns about different kinds of technology. And so I think our little group discussions here have demonstrated that this group is maybe a little bit more balanced in our approach. You were able to we talked a lot about potential positives as well. But I just wanted to underscore the fact that, there often is a lot of fear. Okay, so yes, so we're going to talk a bit about social media test drive. And Eunice and I are representing the social media test drive team from the Cornell Social Media Lab. Natalie Bazarova, who's there pictured in the upper left, is the director of the Social Media Lab. But you can see our team here. And we also have a number of others who are not, undergraduate research assistants. We have other graduate students connected with this project, but a lot of folks with different perspectives kind of coming in to work on this project. Okay, so here's just kind of a little bit about what we wanted to cover today in terms of agenda. So we'll give a little bit of an overview of what it is. Social media test drive. What is this educational program? We'll talk about some different ways folks have implemented it. And we'll share some of what we're learning in our feedback and evaluation studies, and then wanted to share a little bit about some of our future research and open things up for question and discussion. So yeah, so we talked a bit about there are potential opportunities for social media use, and many of the ideas that you all came up with are really reinforced in the research. So according to developmental psychologists such as Erikson, the main and most important developmental task for adolescents is to solve this identity versus role confusion crisis. And as a big part of this, they need to construct their own unique sense of identity. And they're also looking to find the social environment where they feel like they can belong and create meaningful relationships with other people. And social media is actually a really great place for adolescents to explore identity and to connect with others. They can use different platforms and even different accounts within a single platform to dig deeply into specific interests that they have or possibly express different aspects of self. They can become exposed to new potential interests or ideas that they might want to incorporate into their sense of self. And I will say that young people would still really prefer to do this in person, but they often really have little opportunity to do this. This was particularly true during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So aside from the pandemic, they face time-consuming pressures from school, from extracurricular activities, and they often face restrictions from parents, a lack of transportation, a lack of space to congregate, and really moving to online spaces reduces barriers to connection. Having a separate space from their in-person communities to explore identity can also be protective, especially for those with marginalized identities, such as those from the LGBTQ+ community. But as we have talked about, despite these potential opportunities, social media presents possible risks for adolescents as well. And so when we look at this, kind of how these are sort of categorized in the research, so the opportunities afforded by social media might be overshadowed by a lack of skill in navigating these spaces. And there are some particular vulnerabilities of adolescents due to their developmental stage. So these risks related to social media use have been categorized into content risks, which includes being exposed to content that's potentially harmful, such as violent, sexual, or hate material. There's contact risks. This includes things like cyberbullying or being contacted by strangers. There are conduct risks, which include things like sharing personal information or illegally downloading materials. And then there are contract risks, which is when a child or young person is part of or is exploited by a contract or commercial interest. So these are kind of like the big groups of risks out there. And Livingstone and colleagues who developed this framework also emphasize that the nature of the risk is important to consider. So this might include aggressive, sexual, or value-related dimensions. And then down here at the bottom, you can see we have these sort of cross-cutting risks. So these are issues related to things such as privacy, physical or mental health, inequalities, and discrimination. So these are kind of frameworks that we use to think about benefits and risks of social media use. And I feel like many of the things that we talked about in our small group discussions are, reflected here. These are, I think we're coming to consensus with the research out there. And so what do we do here, right? So the challenge is to help adolescents develop the knowledge and skills that will help them maximize the opportunities and the benefits presented by social media use, while also minimizing the potential risks. And so how can we support this as adults who care about young people, who work with young people? And so what we argue is that what we should be doing is intentionally developing social media literacy. And so I'll hand it over to Eunice to talk a little bit more about one way to do that.
So social media test drive is one way to meet this need to develop social media literacy. And it's a free online learning program which prepares young people for real life experiences through learning, practicing, and reflection within a realistic social media simulation. It's designed for middle school age youth who are developmentally poised to be interested in this topic, likely have some exposure to social media, but hopefully are not fully immersed yet. And we're happy to offer Social Media Test Drive as a free educational resource, as it's generously supported by research grants. So next we have a video made by one of our collaborators, Daniel from Common Sense, which describes Social Media Test Drive. And
Hi,
you guys hear
this
it?
is Daniel with the Common Sense Education team. I'm excited to let you know about Social Media Test Drive, a new educational tool that is aligned with our digital citizenship curriculum. For the last few years, our team has been working with researchers from Cornell University to create a tool that promotes social media literacy. Social Media Test Drive is that tool and its goal is simple: to prepare middle school students with the skills they need to navigate the digital world of social media. So, if you're looking for a digital citizenship activity that can be done in a synchronous or asynchronous setting, or if you're interested in helping your students learn things like how to build healthy social media habits or how to identify fake news online, then Social Media Test Drive is the tool for you. So let me show you what this tool looks like. This is the Social Media Test Drive landing page, where you will be able to explore each of the 12 modules we have created. Each module is a social media environment that students can explore while learning how to overcome a digital challenge. Each module is designed to scaffold students' introduction to social media, and they're organized into 4 sections. In the Learn section, students are introduced to key digital citizenship concepts and vocabulary. Then, they are taken to the Test Drive timeline. This first introduction to the timeline environment features pop-up boxes that teach students about things they might encounter on social media, as well as things they can do in case they experience a red flag feeling. In this case, students are learning about cyberbullying. Once students have a grasp for the basic concepts, they move on to the practice section. Here, students have more freedom. They're able to scroll through the timeline and interact with it by doing things like liking a post or writing a comment. The section includes visual aids to help students practice the skills they learned in the previous section. After navigating the timeline with some support, students are sent to the Explore or Free Play section. Here, students get to be fully immersed in a social media environment. They're given some context for what they should look out for as they explore the timeline. But whether they do something or not is up to them. At the end of the activity, students will come across a reflection section where they will have the opportunity to answer a couple of questions about their experience and share some of the things they noticed in the Explore section. Thanks very much for watching. To find more great resources for educators and schools, visit us at Common Sense Education.
Okay, so Daniel did a great job of describing Test Drive, and just to expand on a few key points. So we're founded on this theory called experiential learning theory, and this is one way which our program is really unique. Important aspects of the learning theory are woven throughout the elements of each module, throughout each of the 4 parts. And the clearest example is the social media simulation, where youth can freely interact with the timeline and practice what they're learning. And they can do this in a safe, protected environment where all the interactions are with bots or fake users. So it's scripted ahead of time by researchers on our end. And they can post, comment, interact with them in different ways. And the structure of Social Media Test Drive provides learners with a scaffolded learning experience where they're first introduced to key concepts, guided through application of skills, and given opportunities to freely experiment and then asked to reflect on their actions. So ultimately, we're seeking not only to teach knowledge about these different topics, but also help them actually develop the skills that will transfer to behaviors on real social media platforms. So a recent addition by our team in the past year is the quiz. And after the reflection section, we developed quizzes that can help evaluate what they're learning. So there's 5 multiple choice questions, and they're presented with 3 opportunities to check their answers and answer correctly. And after the 3rd try, explanations are given for each question. And we found that educators like to use this quiz as a kind of like an assessment of whether they're doing what they're assigned to do. So you can print out your responses, save it as a PDF, and they'll often have the students email it to them or turn it in. So as the video mentioned, we have different topics. We have 12 modules currently available that range from a variety of topics that we thought were really important for youth to learn. So it's like something starting with like accounts and passwords, how to create something that's safe. Healthy social media habits is about like how much, like, are you spending too much time online? How can you keep yourself at a reasonable amount? And scams, like how do you recognize if something is real or if it's too good to be true? So those are kind of the topics that we found most applicable. And yeah, this is our current count. We're almost at 1 million users, which is really exciting since we launched the tool. And yeah, we found that on average, the users will engage with the site for about 17 minutes, which could be time to go through 1 or 2 modules. So they're taking their time, exploring the timeline that we have with the different posts and doing the quiz. Yeah, we found that on average, we have about 33,000 users per month. The amount kind of does go up and down depending on the academic school year. Yeah, so for educators on our site, we have different tools that they can use. So starting with this educator guide that just goes through like what social media test drive is, how they can implement it. It has all the key terms in there so educators can review it over time. And we also do talk about like our privacy policy and like the appendix of all the information. And then we also have 2 or 3 webinars on our site that members of our team have done that go into like how can you use this tool more in depth or different parts of it. And we also have a frequently asked questions page where we update it given the questions that like people email us about. So some implementation options, like people do have different ways that they like to use test drive. So like it can either be through like individuals completing the modules at their own pace. It could be an in-class activity led by the educator. Before going through the modules, some educators like to pre-teach the concepts as explained in the educator guide. Sometimes they have learners work through it individually or in pairs. And then some like to have a group discussion after going through the module of the reflection questions, just based on what's already in the module. And then the test drive modules can be completed along with the common sense education lessons. Some of them pair exactly, like the content matches up really well. So it can be used as like a supplementary material. And the ones that line up are explained more on our website and in the educator guide. So yeah, people do use test drive in a variety of settings. Educators facilitate in person. Sometimes they have the young people do it on their own, and then they can just talk about it online with their peers. Sometimes parents and caregivers like to use this tool with their children, and they'll do it together at home. Yeah, so now I'm gonna turn it over back to Mandy, who's gonna talk about if it works.
And I'll just throw out there one other thought on possible implementation strategies. I know in our small group discussion, someone mentioned that they work with more high school age students. And although I would argue that there are plenty of high school students who would also benefit from the content of some of the modules, often they feel like they don't need it, right? That they're already in social media. They have this sense of maturity about it. One thing that some groups we've worked with have done is they actually have high school students kind of teach the modules to younger students, which is a really great kind of scaffolded way to have both middle schoolers and high schoolers kind of benefit from this educational program. So I'll just throw that out there as another potential implementation strategy. But as this slide says, the big question is, does it work? Are we actually doing what we want to do here? We've gathered feedback all along the way, some qualitative, some quantitative work. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but So what we hear from educators is that social media test drive is most commonly used with 6th to 8th grade students, that age group, whether it's in a school setting or out of a school setting. But there is a bit of a range. Some are using it with students who are even younger, up through 9th grade. Most educators are using it as an in-class activity. And we have folks in a variety of kinds of classes. We hear a lot of librarians and media specialists are using this in their classrooms. And about half of them are using it as an individual activity as opposed to small group. Some of them are pre-teaching the concepts, so they're using that educator guide to discuss some of these key concepts and strategies. And some are having a facilitated discussion after the students complete modules. And so, having those tools, we hope make it easier to have those conversations. You're using the same terms. So yeah, we can take a look at the next slide. So we asked, how have you found test drive helpful? And so these are some quotes from educators. So it introduces them to things they would not otherwise think about or even know, such as privacy controls, scams, phishing, how to balance media use. I think students get a device in their hands and they just keep scrolling without regard to anything except the content in front of their eyes. It gives them practical ways in which to engage with social media sites. So that's some of the feedback. Which modules have you found most helpful and relevant? So this is some feedback from educators again. So shaping digital footprint. Youth use apps that contain content that disappears very casually. They feel that it is truly gone when it is not. I used breaking news to assist the children in responding to the war in Ukraine. And then another educator mentioned responding to breaking news, ads on social media, news and social media, and scams and phishing were useful since this is where these kids live. So they're really engaged in these social media environments. We also have some larger scale evaluation studies underway. And so the goals of these are to really understand how effective is social media test drive. We want to look at changing knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors, but we also want to understand for whom test drive works best. And part of the reason for that is it helps us identify ways we can improve the modules to really increase the breadth of its effectiveness. So it's not only effective for particular groups, but rather has a wider reach. First evaluation study, we have two groups. We have our intervention group and our control group. And both groups are completing knowledge assessments, but the intervention group, they're completing test drive modules. And so we're comparing their scores on social media literacy knowledge. And if you take a look at the next slide, these are some of the scores that we're seeing in response to these. And so the lighter green color, this is on average how many questions, 0 to 8, are students who complete modules getting right on these knowledge assessments. So you can see for all of the modules, those who complete the modules are scoring higher in terms of knowledge. Social media literacy knowledge in each of these domains. And then, this can be averaged overall. So we are seeing this positive effect of increasing knowledge about social media literacy. And so, knowledge is one thing, right? As we all know, knowledge is pretty foundational to affecting behavior, but you need something more to actually affect behavior. And so our second study, if you want to go ahead, Eunice, to the next one. Thanks. So this one is very similar to the study one design, but what we're adding is this behavioral assessment component. So again, we have an intervention group. They're completing the module and taking a survey right after, but we also have a control group completing this survey, but no modules. And then 1 week later, both groups are taking this behavioral assessment. So they're actually going into a social media simulation and occasionally running into content that is relevant to the modules they completed. So for example, they may see something that looks like breaking news. And we're looking to see, do they do the things that we were, do they employ skills that were taught in the modules to see, do they check this out to help verify it? Or if they see a post or a comment that seems to be cyberbullying, do they enact any of those behaviors that were taught in that module? Are they supporting the victim? Are they reporting the post? Those sorts of things. So this helps us, again, it's a simulation, right? We hope that these behaviors would then be carried over into real social media platforms. But it is, it does help us get that much closer to seeing, are they actually enacting these behaviors that they're learning in the modules? So this study is actually wrapping up now. We are about to embark in our analysis. So check back later. Hopefully we'll be able to say, yes, we see all of these desired behaviors. But that's in process now. And I will also just throw out there, I don't think we have a slide on it in here, but we're about to launch a new, very small research project, but looking at how do we develop tools that help educators, youth workers, after school program leaders, other adults who are interested in maybe using social media test drive. How do we develop materials that help them take that leap, right? To better understand what this is and how they might use it with young people. And so if anyone is interested in weighing in on that, I would love to hear from you. So feel free to email me. I can throw my email address in the chat. But we're just getting started with that. We'll be designing some materials and involving educators, youth workers, social workers, folks in many different roles and capacities to give us feedback on that process. And I think thank you. So we just want to give a shout out and a big thanks to our key partners and sponsors. Without their support, this would be a very different product. And I did want to, underscore this collaboration with Common Sense Education. They have been really tremendous partners in developing this educational program. They have a much more kind of classroom-based K through 12 digital literacy, digital citizenship curriculum available for free to educators. So just making that plug. We have worked with 4-H, Cooperative Extension, and at Cornell, the Program for Research on Youth Engagement, or Youth Development and Engagement, to really shape what this looks like, working with their educators, working with their youth. And then, of course, generous funding from the Morgan Family Foundation, from the National Science Foundation, and also from Facebook has made this possible. And if you want to connect with us, here's different ways to do that. We are at socialmediatestdrive.org. That's the website where you can get all of the information about the program, but you can also join our email newsletter. There's our project email. I guess we have to update the bird symbol to an X, but you can also reach us there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insight and a bit about the research that you're conducting. It's a really wonderful resources. And I think they fill a gap that it meets the needs of youth as it's developmentally appropriate for them to want to engage with their peers. So how do we let them engage in a way that's healthy? So thank you so much for sharing. We have some time for questions really quickly. Please feel free to unmute or drop your questions in the chat. I do see Kelly's hand is up.
Hi. I have an odd question. I'm curious if you guys have ever studied this with older populations, just thinking about some challenges with social media literacy with older adults who fall prey to a lot of the phishing, not, the stuff that was like the breaking news you were talking about. Has that ever been looked at, or is that ever an interest of yours?
That is a really great question. And maybe Eunice can say more about
Mhm.
future directions. So all of my work is around kind of children and adolescents, but I have to tell you, we have had those conversations, that's another age group that really could potentially benefit from something like this. And I would throw out there that I don't think there's anything necessarily precluding older adults from using this, but some of the content is kind of more geared towards
Sure.
a middle school audience. They're talking about math class and things like that. In the simulated social media platform, but that definitely is a conversation we kind of keep coming back to.
Yeah.
I have
So-
family members that I would like to to take it.
So that's a really good question. And our lab actually, this past year, we are working on a platform for older adults that is kind of the main goal is to protect them against scams and phishing because that's been coming up so much. So we're actually collaborating with University of Buffalo and Clemson and Lehigh, and we actually built a platform that was inspired by Social Media Test Drive. And I'll drop the link here, and it's kind of this huge project, huge collaboration. They're working on like a iOS game that will be, I think they were also inspired by Candy Crush, so kind of making it fun for the elderly population. And on the Cornell side, we're handling the learning platform. So we just kind of launched it. Feel free to like take a look, and I'm sure you can always give us feedback on it too, and you can spread the word. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I see Kelly has her hand up.
Hi, I work in a school system as a behavioral health and wellness coordinator and preventionist, and I'm just kind of curious where in the schedule, like what particular teachers are using this, and kind of how did you go about getting the buy-in from those staff?
Another great question. I think one of the ways that a lot of times we'll connect with educators who are seeing a need, right? So they kind of intrinsically have this desire to do this work. It does tend to fit in with folks who are in this like media specialist role. A lot of times that's also the librarians in the school, which is kind of a big charge, but I know here in New York State, there are actually digital fluency mandates in terms of public education. And so that if you have someone who's interested in doing it, that some of those sorts of policies and mandates are a way to demonstrate why using a tool like this could be to the school's advantage, right? So you're using this to meet a need. And so, it's just kind of connecting those dots. Other places are honestly all over the place. So for example, we've had folks who are kind of more like social studies teachers. If you think about like the breaking news modules, you don't need to use the whole curriculum by any means. You can kind of pick and choose modules as is important or relevant. And so sometimes we have folks who are doing that. Some folks are using it as kind of like a part of their SEL curriculum, the social emotional learning curriculum, thinking about the media balance modules, things like that. So it can fit in a number of places. It's just sort of making the case. Completing a single module takes typically less than 20 minutes. So if folks are adding in pre-teaching or group discussion after, obviously that can be built out quite a bit, but it doesn't have to be either. I think on average, it was something like 12 minutes to complete a module. So it can go pretty quickly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I love that it can fit into different sort of time slots as we've got that throughout our day. Gosh, today just flew by. So thank you so much. I just want take a moment and thank our presenters and thank you for your time and energy. I understand you may have more questions, so please feel free to share them with us. We will pass those along, but I do need to hand this back to Jen to hold up our evaluation slide and also just wrap us up for the day. So thank you again, Mandy and Eunice. I really appreciate your time and the energy you put in today. This was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We would love to hear for everybody who's able to join us today. We'd love to hear what you think about the session. We realize that this scratches the surface on social media use, social media safety, digital literacy. And, I really appreciated, just thinking about the different types of risk out there and the ways to frame conversations with young people, and even thinking more broadly about the other audiences that this can be applied to. So, as the center's facilitation team, as we start planning out for next year, we have more prevention exchanges. We have all kinds of opportunities to provide, little pieces of micro learning opportunities so that when you're looking for information, more information about digital literacy, they're available for you. And so you can access easily. So tell us what you think. Tell us what you'd like to hear more about. And we really appreciate you spending your time with us today. Just as a reminder, we will not have a December prevention exchange. So we will look forward to seeing you in January. I believe that's January 31st, maybe the very last day of the month. I don't have my calendar up. So we check back on our website and we will make sure that we share out our topic for January as those details become available. So one more time, thank you again to Mandy, Eunice, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2024. Take care.
Thank you.